Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the news editor for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start, as usual, please make sure to leave a like, to share, to subscribe, or our podcast to our podcast. To please check out our Patreon, where you can become a subscriber and continue to support the Cradle and allowing us to do the work that we do here. So today, I think we really should start with giving our thoughts with what happened last week, the historic, unprecedented humiliation of a Western, a European leader at the White House by the U.S. president, right? I'm talking about Volodymyr Zelensky, being talked down, being shown the door, being kicked out of the White House, being just something that as we know often happens behind closed doors. This time happened in front of the cameras for the world to see. The man who was a media darling, the man who could dictate what Western states should and should not do, how they should spend their money, etc. On the covers of all the magazines, a complete night and day, right? From what we used to see on Zelensky, the way that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, talked to him and humiliated him again, right? And I think, obviously, here at the Cradle, we don't often discuss the Ukraine war because we are a news outlet and that is focused on West Asia, right? On the situation in West Asia. We don't often go beyond those borders. But the situation, what happened at the White House, it goes beyond the Ukrainian border. It goes beyond the Russian. It goes beyond Europe. It really speaks to the position of U.S. proxies everywhere, right? Under the new Trump administration. And maybe it's a glimpse into the future for what we can expect from those who continue to put all of their fortune at the doorstep of the United States, right? Hoping that the U.S. is going to be the great savior. I think we now know what they really stand for, right? And that is for looting and humiliating other leaders. So I really want to get you guys' thought on this situation and what it could mean for others, as West Asia.
Well, I mean, as everyone has, noted on social media and elsewhere, to be a friend of the United States is often more dangerous than being a foe of the United States.
Yeah, with friends like that who wants enemies, right?
Exactly. And of course, it is a warning to the US's West Asian friends in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, Egypt, the latter two, of course, that have come under immense pressure from the Trump administration to open their borders and absorb 2.4 million Gazans, right?
But it also more significance to the Egyptian president to the White House.
Well, he was obviously smarter than King Abdullah of Jordan and President Zelensky of Ukraine. He avoided a potentially messy situation, but this also is a warning to, or should be seen as a warning by Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, and his government, because they people say, like, Netanyahu's come out today thanking this administration for their generous assistance and aid. And that was one of the things that happened with the Zelensky, Trump, J.D. Vance, fight on Friday. J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, kept saying to Zelensky, "You don't even bother. Have you said thank you?" So Netanyahu comes out today repeating his thanks for what he says the best friend Israel has ever had in the White House to Trump. I mean, really sucking up to the American president.
And after everything Joe Biden did, I mean, let's be like, Joe Biden was a doormat for Netanyahu.
Yeah, but I've argued for a really long time that while people think that Trump is just going to be an easy sort of president for the Israelis to walk on and get what they want, the Israelis have consistently shown more fear over Trump presidencies than any of the others, because with the other presidents, they can work their old system of the deep state to get what they want, and shut down the White House's objections. In the case of Trump, one slight the wrong way, not even in an intention slight, can absolutely unravel decades of close relations. So they've been very worried about that. And Netanyahu continues to be worried because Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy to global conflicts, has come down heavy on him regarding the ceasefires. So what happened with Zelensky was a warning to leaders everywhere that consider the Americans friends, including, of course, the Europeans. But what's, I think, the most important thing to note, and I'll tell you shortly how it affects West Asia, is the absolute frenzy and panic in Europe after watching Zelensky almost coming to blows with the American president and vice president. The Europeans, first of all, they don't know what's going on in various secretive meetings between Washington and Moscow in various capitals and on private phone calls. The UK and France want boots on the ground in Ukraine, but they don't have money to fund this. They're doubling down on trying prove Zelensky's legitimacy, which Trump shot a huge hole in, because Zelensky, as we know, is his tenure finished. He's not been reelected.
Elections, he banned a bunch of parties. I mean,
Yeah, but the Europeans are insisting in being present in these negotiations with the Russians, and the Americans are saying, it's largely none of your business. We're actually involved in discussions about U.S. and Russian interests and the U.S. and Russian relationship. These discussions don't actually involve Europe, though the outcomes of the negotiations can obviously impact Europe, and Europe wants to be part of it. But the Moscow and Washington are talking about a range of issues really directly related to their own relations, like natural resources, maybe shared natural resources, and the use, the arrangement of bringing maybe American companies to help mine Russian resources, transportation routes, mutual demilitarization. What role does the UK and France have in any of those discussions? None whatsoever, except possibly to scuttle them. Now, the heart of the matter is that Trump views the EU as a construct largely created by failing European states that wanted to come together in order to be able to challenge U.S. economic clout and hegemony, okay? Because individually, Europe and France and Germany were nothing, but together they could be a balancer of American power. But he also knows that essentially the EU, after decades, has become nothing, is really nothing other than a bunch of fragmented states, a fragmented union with sovereign states all vying for their own interests and having very disparate interests. And after pretending for decades of being a global power, the EU has really just come down to riding American coattails, So and Trump knows that the EU, with all their militaries put together, cannot challenge U.S. Military power and clout around the world. And so he sees them as, he's carrying European baggage all along. He's paying for their wars, their interests, etc. Enough is enough. But the hostility that's coming out of Europe now, I don't see it turning back anytime soon. I think it will provoke Trump to just double down on issues like tariffs against European allies, okay, to double down on a rapprochement in Ukraine, and even Taiwan. And here's the big question: will Atlanticism and even NATO, possibly down the line, be buried once and for all within the next 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency? But now here's what's interesting for us in West Asia. One thing Trump and his administration don't necessarily see coming in this scenario is that Europe, being badly beaten, humiliated, and bruised, may flip entirely and attach themselves to the Eurasian project. Okay, Europe is connected to Asia by landmass, right? Asia has resources that Europe does not. Okay. Infinite resources that are inexpensive too. Okay, why should they be buying American shale gas at 9 times the price when they can be buying it cheaper from from Asian countries. So and then Europe becomes a major market for these for Asian energy, Asian merchandise, etc. This relationship is can be very symbiotic, can be positive for both sides, and ensure prosperity and stability in Asia and Europe for generations to come. Once you get rid of these
Europeans might join the Belt and Road Initiative.
well, I think there's a good chance of this if they keep getting spurned by the Americans, and then U.S. tariffs also, keep coming. I mean, I think this is the one blind spot that the Trump administration does not see in this. Of course, none of Europe's leadership is remotely reconciled to becoming part of the Eurasian story, because the Eurasian story is now going to be absolutely dominated by the Chinese and the Russians. But they may be forced into that situation. And I mean, if the Americans are buying Russian gas, why should Germany not reinstate Nord Stream, for instance, right? But what could happen in this situation is the U.S. becomes an outlier state. But does an inward-looking Republican-led government in the U.S. care about isolation in that way? Probably not, but it will have major ramifications for American power projection down the road, because Eurasia with Europe means Europe reconciling with Russia, China, and even Iran, because Asian powers are now calling those shots. You can't deal with some of us and sanction others. It's an all or nothing. I think these are the things that are the blind spot for the Trump administration.
What do you think, Karim? What do you think about Zelensky's ill-fated trip to the White House?
Well, first, I think it's peak entertainment. We can all agree on this, but the consequences are very very difficult to think about, at least for me, because what happened, I think, in Europe is exactly what happened now in Syria. For instance, now the new government in Syria hate the resistance more than they hate Israel. And the same happened there. Now they hate Russia, although the United States made them hate Russia. Now they hate Russia more than the United States hate Russia. The exact happened here. They made people through propaganda hate the resistance and hate the Muqawama and the Shias or Iranians more than they hate Israel. So I don't know why the Europe want to continue this war and the United States don't want to continue this war. That's very odd for me. I can't wrap my thoughts around this. So the United States came and they made Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, and all these, and Georgia. They spent decades and decades fueling them propaganda to be against Russia, and now they hate Russia. Okay, we understand that. And now the United States, at least this department, want to stop the war and wants to stop the hatred of Russia. And now these people that were part of Russia now hate Russia more than the United States want them to hate. So I can't wrap my head around it. It's very odd. What I see now, I think Europe will try to play it. Will play it low until Trump is out of the office, because I think what's happening now is it's like a period of time, a odd period of time between the Europeans and the Americans, unless this is the new policy of the United States, which I doubt. And it's as Sharmin said at the beginning, I don't think it's like that weird, because already Trump did it in 2018 to MBS Mohammed bin Salman, when he put him next to him and told him, yeah, he's a good guy. He bought all these billions of dollars. He gave us $450 billion. But I think I don't want to say that Mohammed bin Salman was smart enough, but he was, I think, shy enough not to answer Trump. But I think the mistake was done 3 days ago by Zelensky when he answered Trump and his vice president. And now they are living the consequences of his action.
But, when we talk about the Gulf leaders, I feel like, they're not very comparable to Zelensky, at least in my view, right? Because they actually do hold some cards, and I think that was one of the most interesting lines during the White House squabble was, you have no cards, and I feel like Saudi Arabia, UAE, they do hold, at the very least, their pocket, right? Their wallet is a card big enough. I think Zelensky is more comparable to someone like Ahmad al-Shara, right? The former Mohammed al-Julani, current president of Syria, who's headed to his first tour of Europe in a few weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he really should start, be sweating under his Armani suit, because this does not bode well for him. And, unless you guys want to add anything else about what this situation with Ukraine could mean, I think maybe we can move on to discuss what has been happening in Syria and what has been happening with this de facto government in relation to Israel, right? And to the Israeli attacks to the south of Damascus. Before we started recording, I was looking at a map of Damascus, because there's been a lot of there's been clashes between the Syrian security forces and the Druze, the Druze groups in the south of Damascus. Some dead between both sides. And what makes this more interesting than just some, inter-religious or inter-ethnic fighting is the role Israel has decided to play by saying that they will at all costs defend the Druze in Syria, and that they will not allow the terrorist regime. At this point, Israel really is the only Western nation that is referring to the former Al-Qaeda and ISIS commanders ruling Syria as former Al-Qaeda and ISIS commanders for their own purpose, obviously. And now they're saying they're going to come in, they're going to defend the Druze, they're going to bomb the south of Damascus, etc., etc. This is what Netanyahu and Israel Katz have said. So, what can Shara expect? I think one of the main things one of the main commentaries that came out of the whole Zelensky situation in the White House was Zelensky came in thinking he was Netanyahu. He came in thinking he was Netanyahu and he could, demand anything. And he found that very hard that Shara is currently confronting Netanyahu, right? And actually, another interesting tidbit about what's happening in Syria is the Syrian government has not mentioned Israel. They haven't actually come out with a statement and said, condemning their most recent attacks. I was just checking Sana'a, the Syrian Arab News Agency, and all they have is other Arab states condemning, but not Syria.
Well, I mean, first, that comment wasn't exactly right. I mean, the government of Shara is not confronting Israel. It's just simply not. Which
they're avoiding it. They're pretending it's not happening.
Yeah. And, for me, the clashes with the Druze in Germana on, what was it, Saturday?
It was on March 1st that it started.
Highly suspicious, because they come right after Israel has said, no arms south of Damascus. We will not tolerate any armed people or groups south of Damascus. Yeah. And then all of a sudden this HTS attack on the Druze, because Israel's goal is to try to subvert the Druze population, the south, because there are at least 2 southern governorates that are Druze majority, right? Quneitra and Sueda. And that way, by subverting this population, this minority, and by frightening them, they can perhaps penetrate and create strongholds and support for their continued occupation as a defense against the Al-Qaeda ruled central government. And Druze are notably, it is a religion, it is a community of, that follows Druze practices, but it is largely secular in, its population. And so obviously the Druze of Syria are worried about an Islamist and an extremist and a government that is that has talked inclusivity but acted very exclusively. They have noted very carefully the disarming of Alawites and then the mass murder of Alawites. Right? The torture, murder, looting, etc. of Alawites by the Damascus authorities. They also have past experiences with HTS and its precursor al-Nusra, the land seizures, and then there was a massacre in 2015 in which 30 Druze were killed by Nusra militants. Quneitra, which borders the Golan, is notably anti-Israel because they spend pretty much the entirety of the war in Syria being attacked by Nusra types who operated and attacked Druze villages and towns with Israeli cover. And when I was in Quneitra years ago, this was a constant theme. The Nusra militants didn't do this alone. They had Israeli cover all the way. So, for these reasons, the Druze have refused to disarm. They've refused to let HTS forces enter their regions without the constitutional changes and guarantees that they expect from this government. Al-Shara has said no constitution for 3 or 4 years, so that's not going to happen. In Germana, they're openly barring HTS militants from entering their district, hence the clashes. But the clashes very much serve the Israeli narrative.
Sure.
Yeah, which is nobody has arms south of Damascus except us and our allies, right?
Yeah.
And so Israel is trying to get the Druze on side. Now, the Druze community itself has, we do have some armed factions that have emerged, at least 3 of them. One, which is very close to Shara, the guy who heads that faction, was living in Qatar until he got summoned to Damascus by Shara, and he is obviously he's the Uncle Tom Druze in this scenario. So they're reorganizing themselves for what's coming. I mean, they have potential challenge or face down with the Damascus government. They have potential face down with Israeli forces. So a consensus is still being worked on within the Druze community, but by no means is there going to be a consensus, much like the Kurds in northern Syria. Interestingly, the Kurds and Druze have been meeting over these many months to see if they have common cause. But the Druze have consistently said that they want the territorial integrity, unity of Syria so far. Okay, whereas that's not the case with Kurdish secessionist groups, right? So the Druze are still sticking with the "we want Syria whole" thing, which resonates, goes same stance they took, over 100 years ago when the French wanted to co-opt them, and they refused to, the French offers, and basically stuck with Syria, as they did during most of the war in Syria. They stuck with the Syrian government, who they believed would preserve the territorial integrity of the state.
What do you think, Karim, about the situation with?
Yeah, I think first last week we talked about this, and we mentioned that maybe something will happen south of Damascus, so Israel will intervene, and that's what happened. I think the Israelis are very smart. Previously, they used to have HTS fighters that were fighting against the previous government of Syria, and we know that they opened also hospitals and they gave them aid and everything. So previously their aim or their goal was to overthrow Assad, and now Assad is gone. So now I think their aim is to expand and to get more land from Syria and Lebanon and other places and West Bank. And I think the best way to do it is to act as a hero for the Druze community that already live south of Damascus, so they can take more land. And that's what's currently I said previously with the but it's somehow true. I think for the Druze, people will say no. We prefer to live under Israeli under occupation rather than not to exist at all if we live under Shulani's rule. So that's the some of the mentality there. Also, we have to take this into
what I wanted to
consideration.
just cut in and say, this is the same script as what we saw in Masjid al-Shams. Remember last year when the Israeli interceptor missile killed a bunch of kids at a football field. The Israelis came in, and bombed. They blame Hezbollah. They started intensify their campaign, etc. And now again, right now again, they're saying we are the protectors of the Druze. But as you're saying, Karim, this is at the same time as they're just trying to take more land. Right,
Yeah.
Right now, Syria is being completely balkanized. You have Israel taking over the south, and you have Turkey, which to mention, Sharmin, about what the Kurds have been saying. The PKK laying down their arms, right? After 46 years of war with Turkey now, they lay down their arms. But more interesting than them taking this decision is what the Syrian Kurds said, right? The autonomous administration backed by the U.S., they said this is a decision by the PKK. This does not involve us at all. So what are they saying? That apparently that they're just going to continue waging the war against the forces that have been trying to take over the Syria from them.
It's worth pointing out that this Israeli policy forged under David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of the state, back in the 50s, which is the doctrine of the periphery, which essentially it's been the essence of Israel's regional foreign policy and regional security policy. And the doctrine of the periphery is to, at the time Israel was facing hostile Arab states. So this doctrine was to create alliances, partnerships, and deals with non-Arab and non-Muslim inhabitants and populations in West Asia in order to create a balance against Arab states and, in Israel's neighborhood. So it's a divide and rule tactic, if you will. I mean, the doctrine of the periphery was used to reach out to Turkey, to Iran, today Kurdish populations, today Druze populations, today Christian populations like the Christian fascists in Lebanon who, tacitly support all of Israel's attacks on the resistance axis. We've seen the Kurdish populations in this region, Kurds in Iraq and Kurds in Syria, their interests line up with Israel, and Israel has exploited any opportunity to create a narrative that they have common goals. So I think Israel is now trying to do that with the Druze, but the Druze really took a beating in Quneitra by Israeli-backed forces. And, even in Sueda, Issam Zahreddin, who was, one of a leading figure, sort of an iconic figure in the Syrian armies of Druze origin, and he was buried in Sueda at the entrance of Sueda temporarily when I visited that governorate before the end of the war. And in Quneitra, they have martyr trees where they hang pictures of the martyrs, the Druze martyrs who have died at the hands of Nusra, later on HTS, fully backed by the Israelis. I mean, that is their mantra. And Sueda, again, further away from the Israeli border, I have been to homes of people who had pictures of Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah Secretary General. So Israel doesn't go into a naturally pliant Druze community. It is going to have to divide and rule within that community. I think it's a challenging task for them. However, again, why did an HTS clash erupt against Druze in Jeramana on Saturday, shortly after Israel had said nobody can be armed south of the border? We're going to protect the minorities in this area. It looked really false flaggy or manufactured in order to make Israel's narrative more compelling for the Druze minority in the south of Syria.
And, speaking of false flag, because this is also just comes a few days after remember the bus explosions in Tel Aviv that all of a sudden we stopped hearing about?
Yeah.
From one moment to the next when he was found out that it was
it's a big deal. And within 24 hours, nothing, complete censorship. It was useful for Israel's narrative, and then they didn't want anyone examining it further.
Exactly. And, just to stay in Syria, just a couple of more things that I think are interesting is that there's this report that Israel is lobbying in favor of Russia to keep its bases in Syria, hoping to, keep the country weak and divided. It's their aim. They're lobbying the U.S. for Russia to keep its bases in Syria. I think also maybe even, we can see it as being very plausible after the situation with Zelensky, right? Because remember that Ukraine was very helpful to the Al-Qaeda commanders who are currently ruling Syria, providing them drones, providing them experts, really helping them in the lead up to the campaign. So the ousting of Assad. And
to your point, Esteban, many credit the the Ukrainian training and the drones provided for making a qualitative difference in that last offensive against the Syrian government, the Syrian army. So, in fact, the Ukrainian weapons were potentially instrumental in the downfall of Assad.
They definitely.
But I think if they had no weapons, they would take over Syria.
Yeah,
the way
there's some truth to that too.
the way it happened.
And commenting on what you said, Sema, I think Israel wants Russia and Syria again because they are very smart and they don't want Turkey to take over the whole region or the whole of Syria. They want other factions or other powers inside it.
Because Turkey really has been reaping the benefits. We talk a lot about Israel, but Turkey in the north is they're a few steps away from taking control of Syria's oil fields, right? Syria's wheat fields, and the ISIS army in waiting as well, right? These tens of thousands of ISIS fighters that are in detention camps and their families as well. But there's another story. Like, oh no, blackout in Lebanon.
Yay!
So let me just mention this. Hopefully the lights will come on. We don't have to wait too long. A report last week about the Israeli army, the most moral army in the world, stealing boxes of cash valued at nearly $28 million, gold bars, luxury jewelry, and 183 pieces of weaponry from Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria. Right? This looting campaign, right? This complete looting campaign that the Israeli army has been conducting, and we have a very interesting article on this that we will link to and show you right now on screen. But I want to read one part of it because it's insane. Honestly, they say that the Ynet says that the stolen money is counted in bank machines that were purchased by the military for the looting unit in particular. As well as scales for the gold and jewelry. And all of this is transferred to the Ministry of Defense main cash desk section at the Kiria in Tel Aviv. Right? This is how do you even begin to describe such practices from what is supposed to be again the most moral army in the world, or just an army, any state army to be acting in this way, right? I mean at the same time it recalls the pictures of the trucks full of gold bars from the Iraq War, right? The famous WMDs that the U.S. Army found in Baghdad.
Yeah, but at least the United States said that they are like individual incidents. But here in Israel, they have a looting unit and they go and they have bank accounts for the looting unit. It's crazy. And let's not forget that they looted a lot of olive trees in Lebanon. And I think last month I saw a video. If I found
so maybe viewers don't know this, but they didn't just burn trees; they dug up by the roots trees to steal to take back to Israel.
Yeah. So what I was saying that last month I came across a video, an Israeli woman, making like a sad video that her husband is now living south of Lebanon, and she's sad because he can't bring her olive anymore. So it's insane. It's crazy. Yeah, when you think about it, that you go online and make a video that you are very sad to the public because your husband that occupies part of Lebanon can't get you olives anymore because they are they are getting out of Lebanon. It's crazy. And they came and occupied Palestine. I think it's very normal for them to do this, but for people like us, we say it as very odd, how they are saying this in public, but it's part of their culture, it's part of who they are, so it's very normal for them to make a looting unit or to see Hebrew media talking about this. I think it's very normal.
I mean, just as a reminder too, right? If anybody who might be scandalized by this, I think first of all, the widespread organ theft, right, of practices by the Israeli army. I think when we were talking last week about the handover of the bodies and all of that, that the Israeli leaders were up in arms about how Hamas handed over the bodies. And then we remember that when Israel returned the bodies of hundreds of Palestinians inside a container truck with not even body bags, many of the doctors who examined these bodies, they were talking about incisions, they were talking about missing retinas, they were talking about, a possible organ theft. And also, we know Israel has the biggest, what is it called? Skin bank, right?
Skin bank. tank in the world.
Yeah, where does that skin come from? Well, we'll let our listeners and our viewers come up with that answer. It's very apparent.
Yeah, and before we move on to another topic, I think it's also worth mentioning that this last week, further confirmation came out in the Israeli media, specifically from the Jerusalem Post, that the Hannibal directive was in fact used. Now, I mean, we have had hints in the early days and months since October 7th, 2023. But increasingly, we have confirmations. We have confirmations from Israel's defense minister at the time, Yoav Gallant, that we reported on, I think, in early February. But now they're being specific. The Jerusalem Post says that on that day, on October 7th, 2023, the Israeli Air Force carried out 945 attacks on the Gaza envelope with Israeli helicopters firing 11,000 shells on the article says both Hamas fighters and Israeli settlers and soldiers, but really because the Air Force, the pilots that have been interviewed from that day in the past have said we couldn't differentiate anything on the ground, any humans on the ground from each other. We basically shot at anything that moved.
Yes.
11,000 shells were released from Israeli helicopters against anything that moved in the Gaza envelope, in Jewish settlements, at Israeli soldiers and Israeli settlers. You're literally, and how many died? 1,200 Israelis perished that day. How many were killed by Hamas and how many were killed by any of those 11,000 shells? We're not talking about 11,000 bullets. We're not even talking about the bullets that the Israeli security forces used on the ground against anything that moved, because they also couldn't necessarily differentiate, or from Israeli tanks that blew entire houses apart in Jewish settlements in the Gaza envelope. We're talking about 11,000 helicopter shells launched at anything that moved. So 1,200 Israelis were killed by who exactly?
And something really worth highlighting, because yes, it was the Jerusalem Post that came out with this. This is sourced from the internal army report on the failures of 7 October. This comes directly from the army admitting that the Hannibal directive was activated at around 10:30 a.m. And of course, this is framed as the failure of the army that day was that they acted too late. Right, because the Operation Al-Aqsa flood started at around 6:30 in the morning. That's when they started coming in, all of the Palestinian fighters. And then you don't have an activation of the Air Force until about 4 hours later. So this is what they discuss at large mainly, right? Like that there was chaos, that there was miscommunication, that a commander near the Gaza envelope did not acknowledge that his entire unit had defeated for about 3 hours. So you have the Hannibal directive activated at about an hour and a half before most of the Palestinian fighters were already back in Gaza. So when you're talking about they were shooting anything that moves on the Gaza envelope, they were shooting the captives that were already taken by the Palestinians and those who couldn't make it out, especially from the Nova festival, right? From these rave that was going on right outside Gaza. And at the same time, another interesting revelation is that as the Hannibal directive was being carried out, and before unacknowledged operation called the Sword of Damocles, I believe, was being conducted inside of Gaza. And there were complaints by the army that saying, we should have had more planes firing on the Gaza envelope and not inside Gaza. So all of a sudden, you have the Israeli army saying, essentially, we could have had more casualties on October 7 because of the Hannibal directive, but we didn't because we had helicopters and jets inside Gaza bombing alleged Hamas targets.
And it's really why the Netanyahu government has done everything in its power to delay and obstruct an internal investigation of the events of October 7th. Something that Western media doesn't even report on.
No, this is not reported at all. Even it comes from the army and they don't report it on it.
Yeah, I mean, the Israeli press is full of the news about the Hannibal directive and the fact that the Israeli army killed hundreds of Israeli civilians that day, not Hamas, but Western media, nothing.
It's honest. Do you think? Do you have anything? Any thoughts about this, Karim, or should we move on to the ceasefire goals in Gaza?
I don't know. I think about that. No, I just wanted to say that the Cradle honestly was one of the first who reported on this, and many outlets maybe waited and they were like curious what happened, but we were sure what happened, and we were covering this from day one, and we were covering the Hebrew media and the media coming out of Gaza. We were really one of the first. And
You only needed to look at the pictures of that day, right? The pictures.
yeah, and I just wanted to say to our viewers and people who are watching us, you have also to go to read the Cradle if you only watch our YouTube channel.
We have extensive coverage of the Hannibal directive. We have been among the first. That is, I think, a point of pride for all of us. So let's finish off, I think, this week's episode by talking about what's happening with the ceasefire in Gaza, which has essentially been suspended. Very perverse, in particular because Israel chooses the first day of Ramadan to block all humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, where famine is still prevalent, where Palestinians have been fasting for a couple of days, and now they will not have anything to break their fast on. The United States taking the stance of Israel, of course, saying we support Israel, or no, Israel saying we support the U.S. proposal to extend the first phase of the ceasefire, and Hamas refuses, right? Talks for the second phase should have started almost a month ago. About 3 weeks ago, they should have been already ongoing. Israel delayed it and now unilaterally says we want to extend it by 45 more days, phase one. We want all of the captives to be returned in the first phase. And, they're going to now they're blocking aid. Of course, phase two was supposed to begin clearing of the rubble, I think, right? And more Palestinian prisoners released. And Israel, as you said, Sharmeen, agreement incapable. And putting it on display more than ever before, right? So is there any hope that this ceasefire will be restarted?
First of all, I think it's important to point something out. Everyone's reporting that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy to various crises, including those in West Asia, has a proposal for ceasefire extension. But the only ones actually saying this are not the White House or Steve Witkoff. It is Netanyahu and the Israeli press quoting Israeli officials. So we don't know that there's a Witkoff proposal, or if this is Netanyahu's proposal, all right, that Witkoff's like, yeah, I'm okay with it as long as, Hamas go. We don't actually know. I mean, we're now being sold something that isn't actually very clear. Does Witkoff have his own proposal? Nobody has seen anything like it. I'm just making that clear, as of now at least. Israel has constantly sought to frame every sort of hump in the road they come as a Hamas refusal, right? It's always, anytime there's a bump in the road, Israel tries to blame it on Hamas. In this case, there was an agreement that was signed, okay, in January for a 3-phase ceasefire, each lasting for 42 days, I think it is, and then each having its own unique components. I mean, in phase one, obviously the exchange of many prisoners between Palestinians and Israelis, but also importantly, at least 500 trucks of aid to be allowed in the Gaza Strip every day, allowing Gazans to move back to the north unimpeded, allowing houses, prefab houses to come in, and tents to come in so people can live in areas that Israel has demolished.
Because they say Israel has only allowed 15 mobile homes out of the agreed 65,000.
Correct. And this is a major problem, as we've discussed and got into great detail about in previous podcasts. So Israel has not fulfilled its requirements in phase one. Hamas has fulfilled all of its requirements. Okay. Israel has not fulfilled its requirements, and it wants 50 days extra in which to continue not fulfilling its requirements. There is no indication whatsoever that within a 50-day extension of phase one that Israel will ever allow 500 trucks of anything to come in per day, let alone any more mobile homes or like prefab homes or tents as promised. The reason it wants to put phase 2 off and negotiations on phase 2 is because phase 2 requires a full Israeli troop withdrawal from Gaza, which in phase 1 there was big troop withdrawals from like the Netzarim corridor and other areas, but they would be remaining in the Philadelphia corridor, which is the line between Gaza and Egypt, and then some eastern border points. They have to withdraw fully from those areas in phase 2, and like a proper ceasefire has to be done at that point. And then there's some extra stuff, reconstruction, etc., in phase 3. Now, they don't want to do any of this. They don't want anyone to set up even a tent in Gaza. And now they're saying, okay, Hamas, you didn't agree with our 50-day extension. Why do you need a 50-day extension? Well, from day one, you're stopping trucks from coming in. This is Israel's big fail in phase 1, is to allow supplies to come in, allow the removal of rubble. Remember, we talked about Israel not allowing machinery specifically to remove rubble, because of course you have to remove the rubble even to place the tents. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You know, this blockade in particular on the mobile homes, on the tents, it has already caused the death of at least 8 in Gaza.
Because of the cold we had in the last week or two. Yeah. It was
So
frigid
of
here.
course, you know, like how else but violations? Like what other word, you know? And Osama Hamdan, the leader of Hamas, just spoke a few minutes ago, and he has, because Hamas has maintained this position that they are committed to the second phase of the ceasefire, that they are committed to the talks, and that these are all violations from the Israeli state. And then he names all of these violations, right, including 15 mobile homes out of 55,000, and no construction or finishing materials to rebuild hospitals. They prevented the entry of civil defense equipment to operate Gaza's power plant. They have recorded 210 violations by occupation aircraft and 116 martyrs during the first phase of the ceasefire agreement. How is this can even be considered a ceasefire anymore?
So, well, that's true, but also I think Hamas can very, very importantly now point to Israel's violations of its Lebanese ceasefire, even when it got an extension. So it got an extension after 60-day deadline, right? And after that extension and during that extension, Israel continued to escalate its violations, raze entire Lebanese villages, towns, homes, schools, institutions to the ground, burn down forests, kill people, violate Lebanese airspace, and then at the end of that extension, their troops remained in 5 key sites on the Lebanese border inside Lebanon. So, of course, Hamas's argument is like, no, because you're going to continue violating the ceasefire. And we have evidence of this. We've just watched it happen. Okay. No, we're not going to do an extension. What part? In fact, like the Israeli part of this, of what's not getting done in phase 1 of the ceasefire, Israel really doesn't have to do. They just have to allow aid trucks that others are providing to cross the Egyptian border into Israel. Israel's just preventing this. It has nothing much to do except allow aid trucks to come in. And so what does it want a 50-day extension for exactly? Like for what? So Israel wants to try to get all the hostages, released, all the Israeli captives released in these 50 days, which is not on. The agreement stipulates that that'll happen in phase 2, but Israel does not want phase 2. So now the game is on between the Netanyahu cabinet of extremists and right-wingers, the Israeli opposition that wants a ceasefire and to be done with this problem, and of course hostage families and regular Israeli citizens who do want an end to conflict and who do want to see Israelis return home. And, you know, the thing is, all of this is happening while the big Ukraine-Europe shenanigans are going on. So I think Netanyahu's using this opportunity to squeeze through things when global attention is elsewhere and the attention of the Western powers, its Western allies. But nobody's going to have this in this region. I mean, Hamas cannot possibly accept a 50-day extension, especially after they've seen what's happened in Lebanon. The interesting thing to watch is, you know, one of the provisions of this deal is that Arab states would assist Hamas in ensuring the implementation of the ceasefire agreement and in all its stages wherever they can. Let's see if Arab states will step up. They are motivated to step up because they're very worried about Trump's Gaza Riviera plan. So Egypt, by the way, you can catch this on the Cradle's feature over the weekend, was Egypt's plan for Gaza, which is reconstruction specifically, because the last thing Egypt wants is 2.4 million Gazans spilling over its borders. So all of a sudden, Egypt and other Arab states have hashed together an actual plan, which is to reconstruct Gaza as quickly as possible and with as many donors as possible. And so this clashes violently with Israel's expectations. Let's see who wins these rounds.
But here's, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Karim, because what the Israeli establishment has been saying is that they are ready to just return to war. That's it. They want to reignite the general's plan, which is the ethnic cleansing campaign of Palestinians in Gaza, to block all aid. They've called up, I think they either prepared to call or have already called up 400,000 reservists. So the Israeli war machine is just preparing to roll again. Do you give any hope to this, Karim, moving forward?
We said it also previously. I said, I prefer Hamas to keep some of the captives or prisoners so they have some leverage, because if they deliver all the captives, they don't have leverage. Israel can do whatever it wants and nobody can stop it. Egypt or Jordan, they don't care. And of course, the West also, they will provide whatever Israel needs to continue the war.
The U.S.
Why they are
just signed, right? Like billions more to Israel in emergency.
Yeah, I think 3.2 billion or something for weapons, as if they need more weapons. So, but I think also, we said it also previously for our old viewers, they will know that we said that Israel usually, when there's a deal, they like to extend the deal, because they don't want to feel that they lost, or they don't want the majority to think that, Israel did this because Hamas said so or because Hezbollah said so. Mm-hmm. The same they did in Lebanon. They asked for extension once and then twice, and now nobody is talking about it. You know what I mean? Yeah, nobody in Israel will say, okay, Hezbollah forced the war to stop. And the same they want to do in Gaza. And they've been doing this since years. And especially, I always say that when Sharon, who was like a god in Israel, when he went to coma, they did whatever they can to keep him alive in a coma for 1 year. So people will not say Sharon died. You know what I mean? They like to
They can never lose.
Yeah, because they take their time. People will not talk about what's happening. You know what I mean? So I think that's what they do. Yes.
Can Netanyahu afford to restart the war fully? And will Trump tolerate the ramifications of that and how much it sucks up his foreign policy energy more than for a few weeks or a month or so? I'm very curious about that, because Trump doesn't want these headaches. For sure, if Israel starts its war, even if it blames for the war starting, and Trump's like, okay, we're going to, open the gates of hell on Gaza and bombing for like a month, and then realizing nothing fundamentally changes except casualty numbers go up and Israel starts looking bad again, and America gets flack for supplying weapons to Israel again. And the global community screams, but there was a ceasefire on the table. Why did you let this idiot Netanyahu ruin it? At that point, does Trump go, I need this guy out of my face? There are real sort of sinkholes potentially available, ahead for Trump, for Netanyahu, if he proceeds with a policy that distracts from Trump's main interests, which is not foreign policy.
It depends if they have a video of Trump. I don't know if they have a video of Trump.
And
I'm 100% sure they have a video of Elon Musk. If you go by,
do you not think? But let me just ask you: do you not think that they have videos of Netanyahu and the entire cabinet of like seedy bastards? I got to tell you, read the other day that this is Netanyahu's third marriage, and he's like consistently cheated on his wives, including his current one, right? Like, do you remember, was it like a year or two ago that we had pictures of Ehud Barak,
Yeah.
the former Israeli prime minister, standing in like suggestive positions in his bathroom with his leg propped up on like a ledge.
Ehud
And
Barak was a constant visit to Jeffrey Epstein.
yeah, but come on. Jeffrey Epstein closely tied with the occupation state. Like, tell me that the Americans in kind don't have these kind of visuals. In fact, was the Ehud Barak pictures, were they not leaked by like an Iranian hack? Maybe I'm wrong about that. But the point is, these are all like grotesque end of empire figures, okay, who have become fully what's the word? Gluttonous, right? In their heyday, in their right. And so I'm sure pictures exist of all these people. I don't think that's a card that can be used, really.
I think, we should look at what's actually.
In Trump's case, of course, it's a big card.
Trump's going to shy away from the fact that no. You mean Trump's going to bend to Netanyahu's will? I don't know why. I think he's like the only one who potentially won't, and it will rub him the exact opposite way. I mean, really, I'm not saying this absolutely. I'm just putting the question to you guys and maybe our viewers. Is Trump going to tolerate more than another month or so of a Netanyahu relaunch of a war on Gaza? Or is he going to cut the guy off?
Let me jump in with two things. The first is that Trump, he's already been convicted in U.S. courts, right? This is like the big thing with the liberals. This is a convict U.S. president. So I think I don't want to say bulletproof, but I feel like this man is very like Teflon, right? Like I feel there's very little that can actually hurt him, and in particular with his supporters, right? Because for them, the man can do no wrong. He's God. He's the second coming of Jesus to many of them, and to those who he isn't, they talk about Elon Musk in this way. The second thing I wanted to mention was that in 2 weeks, the Trump White House has already greenlit $10 billion, about $10 billion in emergency military aid for Israel bypassing Congress, right? They call it an emergency funding so that they don't actually have to go to Congress and it can just go directly to them. So I think, and this includes a whole bunch of 2,000-pound bombs, a whole bunch of, destructive equipment that was apparently being banned or just held back by the Biden White House. It includes bulldozers that we have seen used very liberally in the occupied West Bank, where the whole Gaza blueprint is being applied as we speak. And it also it includes something else I forgot right now. But essentially, he also lifted this restriction that Biden had put for the army, for the U.S. Army in this case, to target other nations, to target, expanded the bank of people that can be targeted by army commanders, right, directly. And I think this points to the one question mark that remains in the axis of resistance, and that is Yemen, right? Because Yemen has also been saying, if the war in Gaza restarts, this is what Abdul Malik al-Houthi said last week, we have our finger on the trigger, and we are ready to rain down fire on Israel, and all of these grandiloquent statements that the resistance leaders like to make. But like I said, Yemen is still a question mark, and the U.S. seems to be at the same time showing that they will support Israel no matter what, and are already loosening some restrictions so that the next time Yemen or anybody else tries something, the attacks are going to be, I guess, different, right?
But are these concessions to Israel just crumbs to buy off Netanyahu so that he can't make the argument, we can't have the ceasefire because we have to secure our interests? Or is it not like Trump and Witkoff's way of saying, because they've come down with marching orders, right? Of phase one of the ceasefire deal at all happening, and now pushing for round 2 to start. They've come down heavy on Netanyahu. So is this not a way to buy Netanyahu's coming into these next phases and
like butter him up a bit?
No, just saying you're gonna do this, but I'll sweeten it with that. You know what I mean? Really, it's hard to tell. My question, though, is back again. Let's say the war restarts, okay, and Israel gets some surprises, and Yemen comes back into play. and Iran starts talking about Operation True Promise 3 again, but like every day now. And the Arab states that have normalized with Israel get put in a really bad position again. And here's Trump trying to work out things with Putin, and with Europe, and Ukraine, and this blows up again. How long do you think Trump's patience will last with Netanyahu and co. before he says, shut it down? It's too much of a distraction. You ask me for $10 billion every 2 weeks. Will that happen? I'm asking you guys. That's my view of a very possible scenario, because Trump is an unknown. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think this will never happen because Netanyahu will tell Trump when he can stop and when he can start, and I think even more that Trump will use the U.S. Army fully with the Navy in support with Israel.
Have the aircraft carriers even left the Red Sea or the Mediterranean? We haven't seen anything about that.
Well, probably because there hasn't been any confrontation since the Gaza ceasefire took place, so nobody's really reporting where these carriers.
I do actually have to side with Karim this time. I don't see it happening. I really don't. It would be such. I guess after the Ukraine thing, you could maybe start thinking oh, it's possible, right? With Netanyahu, right? And we should put up the picture of Butler Trump pushing in the chair for Bibi during his visit to the White House now. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see, I think, where this whole extension of the ceasefire goes, because I think it's pretty inevitable at this point that the carnage is going to restart in Gaza.
And let us know in the comments.
Man, let us know, please. Please let us know in the comments what you think. But, that's my view. I feel like for now, there's no likelihood that Trump is take a stand against Israel, right? Because taking a stand against Netanyahu is taking a stand against Israel. This is just the way that is framed.
But however, there have been attempts, including by the Democrats from the early days of the carnage in Gaza, to separate Netanyahu out apart from Israel. Yeah, and we would often make the argument like you can try that tack, but actually Israel is fully behind Netanyahu's war in Gaza. You cannot separate the two. But I think if this restarts and it becomes problematic for Trump, then Netanyahu again becomes, for Democrats and Republicans, a liability, right? The idea being if you can get rid of him or you can get someone in his stead, that the Western states can re-embrace Israel because the problem's now gone, Anyways, all of this lies ahead of us. Anything can change at any time, and we're unlikely to know or be able to predict anything with the bizarre series of events going on in the world right now. Not just going on, but so quickly, so incredibly quickly. It's not years anymore. Okay, things can change on a dime any day now, and that's what makes, I think, journalism so damn interesting these days.
I will make one prediction, and that is the Syrian government is not going to do a single about Israel attacking its south or mobilizing further, taking control of anything. That is not.
That is the safest bet anyone can make. Let's be honest.
You should see the propaganda in Arabic to see. They are saying he's the one who's gonna liberate Palestine, and now he's acting like Sinwar. He's going low key. So after 5 years, he can launch the biggest attack on Israel. Yeah, the propaganda, man. Yani if you don't read Arabic, you live in heaven.
It is true. It is true. The man is. He's the next Zelensky. He's gonna be the next Bond.
Penny, did you come close to the mic because you've been testing this even before the podcast to see how sultry your voice can sound?
Yeah.
Did you see him doing that, Esteban?
Yes. He was very
Biden is not better than me.
I won every precinct.
Karim has a new mic and he's so excited about it. And at the end of every podcast, he packs it up in the box like new. And then, at the beginning of the following week, he unpacks it it's like a little baby in a basket. Unbelievable. I'm glad you're having fun, Kenny.
Yes, and I think with that we can finish for this weekend. Again, a reminder: please check out our Patreon, where you can continue to support the Cradle. Maybe allow us to get a fancy new microphones like Karim does there, and we will all have sultry voices moving forward. We want to thank you all for joining us. Please make sure to share, to like, to subscribe, and to find us on our social media platforms. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Shar.
Karim?
We can't hear you.
Karim? Karim?
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, I can't hear Karim. Karim, can you hear her? Your microphone.